Hello and welcome to this podcast on the autonomic nervous system. My name is Mohammad Farid Jabir. The autonomic nervous system is quite a complex topic and which can easily sort of muddle up medical students. So in this podcast I've tried to simplify it as much as possible, and in this podcast I'll be discussing about both the systems, that is the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, their innervated organs, their mechanism of action, the receptors involved in the whole process, as well as the actions of each receptors. To start off, the autonomic nervous system controls most of the systems in the body, such as digestion and circulation. Regulation of the autonomic nervous system primarily occurs via negative feedback, and the autonomic nervous system has many afferent fibers that carry these negative feedback signals back to the hypothalamus and medulla, which are the control centers. As we know it, it's divided into two major parts, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. Most organs in the body are dually innervated by both systems to oppose each other. A simple way of remembering their function is to think of the sympathetic nervous system as being catabolic and involved in the flight and fight response, and the parasympathetic nervous system involved in anabolic processes where products are formed and stored. Going on to discuss about the two systems, the sympathetic nervous system originates from the thoracolumbar region of the spinal cord. That's from T1 to L3. The transmitter substance released at sympathetic nerve endings is noradrenaline. Certain sympathetic nerve fibers tend to innervate organs directly, as in the case with the adrenal medulla, which releases adrenaline into the circulation. Noradrenaline tends to act on all the effect organs by acting on all receptors, that's both alpha and beta receptors. This chart here demonstrates the effects of the sympathetic nervous system to bring about the flight or fight reaction. Physiological processes that occur are pupillary dilation. Noradrenaline also has an increased chronotropic and inotropic effect on the heart, increasing heart rate and contraction, that is. Bronchodilation of lungs occurs due to stimulation of beta-2 receptors which are present in the lungs, and constriction of blood vessels to skin occurs to enhance blood flow to large skeletal muscles. The liver also increases glucose via glycogenolysis. Coming back to the parasympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic fibers leave the central nervous system via the cranial nerves 3, 7, 9 and 10 of the brainstem, and also segments of the sacral spinal cord, which are S2, S3 and S4. In the case of the parasympathetic nervous system, the postganglionic fibers release acetylcholine, while as earlier mentioned in the case of the sympathetic nervous system, the postganglionic fibers tend to release noradrenaline. Effects of the parasympathetic stimulation are complete opposite of the sympathetic nervous system, that is pupillary constriction occurs, salivation, bronchoconstriction, increased gastric motility and contraction of urinary bladder. So it's basically the parasympathetic nervous system takes over the normal physiological processes that occur during rest. This image here demonstrates all the major organs innervated by both the sympathetic nervous system as well as the parasympathetic nervous system and the organs that they innervate. The blue line demonstrates the parasympathetic nervous system originating from the brainstem of the cranial nerves 3, 7, 9 and 10, and sacral nerves arising from S2, S3 and S4. The red line demonstrates the sympathetic nervous system originating from T1 to L3 as shown in the diagram. Going on to discuss about adrenoreceptors. There are primarily two types. To make it simple, beta receptors bring about inhibitory effects, whilst excitatory effects are mediated by alpha receptors of the sympathetic nervous system. However, it's important to take note that there are two exceptions, that is alpha stimulation of nerves innervating the smooth muscles of the gut bring about an inhibitory effect as opposed to an excitatory effect. And the second is beta stimulation of the heart, which brings about an excitatory effect. Going on to discuss about the two receptors. Beta receptors are of two types, beta 1 and beta 2. Beta 1 is present in the heart and intestinal smooth muscle, while beta 2 is found in the lungs, blood vessels and uterine smooth muscles. Alpha receptors, on the other hand, are of two types, alpha 1 and alpha 2, and these are primarily involved in the sympathetic nervous system. Stimulation of presynaptic alpha 2 receptors by the sympathetic nerves releases norepinephrine, and these alpha 2 receptors have a negative feedback mechanism, hence reducing the release of noradrenaline. Going on to discuss about the neurotransmitter, the commonest is acetylcholine, and it is the neurotransmitter released in synapses. Specific areas they are involved are in preganglionic autonomic nerves, that's both sympathetic and parasympathetic, postganglionic nerves of only the parasympathetic nerves, and again to repeat, the sympathetic nerves release noradrenaline at the postganglionic neurons. And also the nerve directly innervating the adrenal medulla releases acetylcholine as well. Going on to the receptors that acetylcholine act on, there are two types, nicotinic and muscarinic. In the case of muscarinic receptors, acetylcholine is released at the end of the parasympathetic postganglionic receptors which act on it. And there are three types. M1 is present in the brain and gastric parietal cells, M2 in the heart, and M3 in smooth muscles and glands. Nicotinic receptors occur in autonomic ganglia and as well as the adrenal medulla. The autonomic ganglia is a neuronal cell body considered as a sort of a junction between the autonomic nerves arising from the central nervous system and the postganglionic fibers innervating their target organ. Acetylcholine binds to these nicotinic receptors, stimulates the autonomic ganglia, and brings about the stimulation of the innervated organ. That's about it for this podcast. I hope it was quite simple and straightforward, and we discussed primarily just the physiological process that the autonomic nervous system is involved in, the two types, that is the parasympathetic and sympathetic nervous system, and the physiological processes that they bring about, as well as go into some detail about the receptors present in the autonomic system, as well as the neurotransmitter involved in them. We also discussed in a bit of detail about the receptors that are present within the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, That's about it. Thank you and goodbye.